The grand cenacle of the Concordance was a chamber designed to humble empires. Its ceiling was a seamless dome of captured starlight, a swirling, living tapestry of nebulae and distant galaxies held in a slow, eternal dance by gravitational projectors. Light, ancient and profound, cascaded down onto the central dais, illuminating the gathered representatives of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilizations. The air itself hummed with a low thrum of contained energy, a symphony of stasis fields, life support systems, and the faint, psychic resonance of minds that had witnessed the birth and death of stars. Yet, for all its engineered grandeur, the chamber felt small today, constricted by a silence so heavy it seemed to have its own gravity. At the heart of this silence was a void, a single, unwavering holographic image of a starship. It was a vessel of unknown origin, hanging in the void between systems, a dark, silent enigma that had undone millennia of established cosmic law. High Luminary Xyloc of the Cathar Imperium rested his three-fingered hands on the cool, psionically attuned obsidian of his console. He was ancient, his carapace a mosaic of fine cracks that spoke of centuries spent in contemplation and leadership. He had presided over the signing of the Treaty of Cygnus, mediated the ash wars of the Vexian hegemony, and guided his own people through the Great Fading, a spiritual crisis that had nearly consumed their civilization. He had seen everything the galaxy had to offer, or so he had believed. This was new. This was a silence that screamed. The ship, designated only as Anomaly 1, had simply appeared. It had not torn through spacetime in a blaze of exotic particles, nor had it emerged from a shimmering wormhole. One moment there was empty space. The next it was there. It emitted no drive signature, no heat, no radiation beyond the faint albedo of distant starlight on its hull. It was a perfect negation, a hole in the sensorium of the galaxy. "It mocks us," a harsh voice rasped, shattering the quiet. Warlord Grack of the Vexian hegemony slammed a massive, clawed fist onto his own console. The sound was a discordant clang in the otherwise serene chamber. Grack was a creature of force and fury, his species having carved their empire from the bones of their rivals. His chitinous armor was a deep blood red, and his mandibles clicked with undisguised aggression. It sits in the buffer zone, a core-ward transit corridor ignoring all hails, all protocols. It is an act of supreme arrogance, a challenge. It is a weapon being aimed at the heart of the Concordance, and we sit here, drowning in philosophical drift while the blade is sharpened. From across the dais, a cool, synthesized voice responded. It came from the representative of the Cygnian conclave, a being of integrated chrome and biological tissue whose consciousness resided within a quantum computational matrix. Its form was an elegant, unsettling fusion of artifice and life. Warlord Grack's assessment is predicated on aggression, a common Vexian cognitive bias. The data does not support this conclusion. The data, in fact, supports no conclusion. That is the fundamental problem. The object defies our understanding of physics. Its mass is calculable, consistent with a vessel of its size, yet its energy state is null. A state of absolute zero that should not be possible outside of a laboratory environment, let alone on a kilometer-scale object in deep space. It does not exist according to our models of reality, and yet it is undeniably present. Xyloc inclined his head, his multifaceted eyes catching the swirling light of the celestial dome. The conclave speaks truth. We are facing not an enemy, but an impossibility. To react with force is to strike at a shadow. We do not know what it is, where it came from, or what it is capable of. A shimmering pillar of light near the chamber's edge pulsed with soft, melodic tones. It was the Lumina, a non-corporeal species that perceived the universe as a symphony of cosmic vibrations. Their communication was a blend of telepathic imagery and harmonic resonance. The song has changed. The Lumina broadcasted into their minds, a feeling of deep, ancient water stirred by a falling stone. A new instrument has joined the orchestra. It does not play our melody. It is silent, but its silence alters the music of all things around it. It is a dissonance, a question. A question that demands an answer, Grack countered, his voice a low growl. The Vexian hegemony has fleets poised at the edge of the buffer zone, a demonstration of our resolve, a probe to gauge their reaction. If it is a weapon, we will force it to reveal itself. If it is a ship, we will compel it to speak. And if it is something else entirely, Xyloc's voice was soft, yet it carried the immense weight of his authority. He turned his ancient gaze upon the Vexian warlord. If it is a natural phenomenon our science cannot yet comprehend, or a being whose existence operates on principles so alien that a military probe would be like a child throwing a rock at the moon. Your resolve could provoke a catastrophe we cannot imagine. You speak of blades, warlord, but you are blindfolded, swinging a sword in a room full of unknown, delicate machinery. The Signian representative's optical sensors glowed a placid blue. The High Luminary's logic is sound. We have run 17 million simulations based on the available data. In 94% of scenarios, aggressive action results in an outcome classified as existential uncertainty. The range of possibilities includes our own annihilation, the destabilization of local spacetime, or an effect so far outside our predictive models that it cannot be articulated. The remaining 6% of scenarios result in no response, which would yield no new data and waste significant military resources. The logical course of action is continued observation. Observation, Grax spat the word like venom. We have been observing this phantom for 3 rotations. It has done nothing, it simply is. This is a strategy, a form of psychological warfare. It projects an aura of invincibility through inaction. It wants us to grow complacent, to lower our guard, or it wants us to fracture, to argue amongst ourselves until our unity crumbles. Look at us. It is already working. He was not entirely wrong, Xyloc conceded internally. The Concordance, a fragile alliance of wildly disparate cultures, was held together by a delicate web of treaties and mutual self-interest. A true unknown, a power that operated outside their shared understanding of the universe, was the greatest possible threat to that stability. The Vexians saw a nail that must be hammered. The Signian conclave saw a flawed equation that must be solved. The Lumina felt a disturbance in a cosmic order they held sacred, and his own people, the Cathar, felt a profound spiritual unease. Their entire philosophy was based on the Great Design, the belief that the universe was a knowable, ordered creation with immutable laws. The silent ship was a blasphemy in motion, a direct contradiction to their most deeply held truths. It suggested the universe was not a text to be read, but a canvas that could be rewritten by an unknown hand. He allowed the silence to stretch again, letting the weight of the moment settle over the representatives. The holographic ship turned slowly in the center of the room, its hull a smooth, featureless black that seemed to drink the starlight from the dome above. It was so simple, so devoid of detail, no weapon emplacements, no sensor arrays, no viewports, no visible propulsion systems. It was a perfectly sculpted abstraction of a starship, a platonic ideal rendered in an unknown material. They had sent probes, of course, micro-drones that moved at near-light speeds designed to be undetectable. They had approached the vessel, their sensors straining to find any purchase, any data point to analyze. But as they drew near, they had simply ceased to be. There was no explosion, no energy discharge from the silent ship. The probe's signals just stopped, as if the space they occupied had been neatly excised from reality. Xyloc focused on the image, trying to feel its essence, to understand its purpose. For weeks, they had referred to the beings who built it simply as the anomaly or the outsiders. It was only recently that a name had been retrieved from a stray, ancient data fragment found in a derelict listening post near a previously uncharted star system. The fragment was corrupted, but one word was clear, repeated in a simple, mathematical cipher. Human. It meant nothing to them. The word was not in any concordance linguistic database. It was as alien and empty as the ship itself. We have exhausted our options for passive observation, Xyloc said finally, his voice resonating with a renewed sense of purpose. And we will not resort to the warlord's crude provocations. There is a third path. We will attempt a more fundamental form of communication, not a hail, not a threat, but an offering. He looked to the Lumina. You perceive the universe as a symphony. We will add our own voice, a deliberate and structured melody. We will broadcast the great canticle of unity. Grax scoffed, a rattling sound from deep within his thorax. You want to sing to it? We are facing a potential armada, and the High Luminary proposes a concert. The canticle is not music, warlord, Xyloc corrected him, his tone sharp with a rare edge of condescension. It is the mathematical foundation of the concordance. It is a complex waveform containing the core principles of our physics, our biology, our philosophy. It is a message of pure information, a declaration of who we are, encoded in the universal language of mathematics. It is an act of total transparency, an offering of peace and knowledge. If they are intelligent, they will understand. If they do respond, then we will know we are not dealing with a civilization but something else, and we will reconsider your more direct methods. The Signian representative's lights shifted to a thoughtful green. This approach has a higher probability of yielding new data without escalating the situation. The logic is sound. The conclave supports this. The lumina pulsed in agreement, a warm, resonant chord that seemed to momentarily soothe the tension in the chamber. A true note offered in peace. The song will welcome it or reject it. The universe will listen. Grak remained silent, his mandibles working in agitation, but he did not object further. He knew he was outvoted. The concordance would make its offering. Xylok gave the order, his ancient fingers tapping a sequence on his console. Across the galaxy, a network of deep space transmitters, synchronized to the atomic level, turned their attention to the coordinates of the silent ship. They began to broadcast. It was a signal of immense complexity, a structured waterfall of data that began with the value of pi and unfolded outward to describe the formation of galaxies, the evolution of life on a dozen worlds, the sorrow of war, the beauty of art, the logic of their most advanced sciences, and the shared hope for a peaceful future that bound them all. It was everything they were, a galaxy holding its breath and speaking its name to the void. They transmitted for a full-day cycle. The signal washed over the human ship, a tide of pure knowledge, of vulnerability and trust. The ship did nothing. It remained silent, motionless, a perfect obsidian enigma against the backdrop of infinity. The silence that followed the transmission was heavier than before. It was the silence of a hand extended that had not been taken, the silence of a profound and deeply felt rejection. In the grand cenacle, the weight of that silence was crushing. Warlord Grak's crimson carapace seemed to darken with vindicated fury. He opened his mouth to speak, to declare the failure of diplomacy and the necessity of war. But before he could utter a word, it happened. The holographic display in the center of the chamber flickered. Every sensor across the concordance screamed in unison, not with alarm, but with utter, stupefying disbelief. The human ship did not move. It did not power up a weapon or a drive system, but the space around it did. The stars behind it, light years distant, began to warp and bend, their light pulled into a swirling vortex of impossible geometry. The very fabric of spacetime was being folded, pleated, gathered like cloth by an unseen hand. The ship itself was the calm, unmoving center of a storm that was rewriting the laws of physics. It wasn't traveling through space. It was pulling its destination toward it. The Signian representative went rigid, its synthesized voice strained with computational overload. Impossible. This is a topological manipulation of spacetime geometry. The energy requirements would exceed the output of a supernova. It is not possible. Our physics does not allow for this. It is. The lumina pulsed erratically, a frantic, discordant arpeggio of pure shock. The song is broken. The instrument is not playing music. It is weaving the loom of creation. It is rewriting the symphony. Before anyone could process the implications, a new signal emanated from the human ship. It was not a response to their canticle. It was a simple, elegant, and terrifyingly clear message, translated instantaneously into the primary languages of every member of the concordance. It appeared as text on their consoles, spoken in a calm, synthesized voice through their chamber's audio system. It said, "We received your broadcast. It is a beautiful composition. We are human. We are coming to you now. Please do not be alarmed." The swirling vortex of spacetime intensified, and the ship, still silent, still inert, began to shrink as the distance between it and them was annihilated not by speed, but by a fundamental reordering of reality itself. In the grand cenacle, the representatives of 100 worlds could only stare, their millennia of wisdom and power rendered utterly meaningless. The impossible was happening, and it was on its way. The arrival was an event of sublime terror and awe. There was no thunderous entry, no flash of light. One moment, the sky above the Concordance capital world, Cathar Prime, held only its familiar twin suns and the slow drift of orbital platforms. The next, the human ship was there. It hung in the upper atmosphere, a kilometer of seamless, matte black material that absorbed the golden light of the suns without reflection. It was a void against the heavens, its presence a gravitational anomaly and a philosophical crisis made manifest. The planet's defense grid, a network of planet-sized energy projectors capable of atomizing moons, remained silent. Its targeting systems could not acquire a lock. The ship registered on their sensors as a perfect absence, a patch of spacetime that was geometrically present but existentially void. In the grand cenacle, the tension had transformed from fear of the unknown into a paralytic state of shock. Warlord Grak's aggression had collapsed into a stunned, watchful silence. The Signian conclave had diverted its entire processing power to analyzing the impossible physics of the ship's arrival, its representative form now motionless, its internal computations a silent storm. The lumina's light flickered with a low, mournful hum, a threnody for a universe whose sacred laws had just been proven to be mere suggestions. High luminary Xyloc felt the weight of ages settle upon his carapace. He had lived through epochs, but his entire existence now felt like a prelude to this single moment. He stared at the holographic representation of the ship, now a real and terrifying presence in their sky, and felt an emotion he had not experienced in centuries, utter humility. His people, the Cathar, had spent thousands of years interpreting the great design. These humans, they did not interpret, they edited. Another message arrived, as calm and clear as the first. It was an invitation. We request permission to send a representative to speak with you. We will transmit the coordinates for a secure, isolated chamber of your choosing. Our envoy will arrive via personal transport. We assure you we come in peace. The request itself was a demonstration of power. They did not ask for a landing zone or docking coordinates. They would simply arrive where they were told. The implication was clear, nowhere was inaccessible to them. Grak's mandibles clicked, a sound like grinding stone. A trap! They will materialize an army in our midst. We must refuse. We must fire upon that obscenity in our sky. And what would you fire, warlord? Xyloc's voice was weary, devoid of its earlier sharpness. Our weapons are designed to deliver energy to a target through space. Their vessel does not seem to be in space in any conventional sense. It occupies it. Firing on it might be like trying to shoot a hole in the ocean. The attempt would be futile, and the consequences of disturbing whatever force they command are unknowable. He turned to the other council members. We have no choice. We extended the hand of communication with our canticle. We cannot now withdraw it in fear. We will accept their offer. There was a murmur of assent, born not of courage, but of a shared recognition that all other options had been exhausted. The Cygnian conclave, its computations having seemingly reached a dead end, concurred. The acquisition of new data is the only logical path forward. Direct interface is required. The coordinates were sent. A decommissioned diplomatic chamber deep within the spire of the cenacle, shielded by meters of dense alloy and its own independent power source. It was a place designed for negotiations with the most volatile of species, a room that could be sealed, and if necessary, jettisoned into space. The humans were being invited into a cage. Xyloc wondered if they knew, and if they were amused by the Concordance's primitive precautions. The council gathered in an observation room overlooking the designated chamber. The room below was empty, a stark circle of polished gray stone. A holographic imager stood ready to project the council members' forms into the room, allowing them to speak with the envoy without being physically present. It was another layer of security, another fragile barrier against the impossible. They waited. The air was thick with anticipation. No one knew what to expect. A towering being of pure energy. A grotesque biological horror, a machine of chrome and fury. At the appointed moment, a faint shimmer appeared in the center of the empty chamber. It was not a tear in reality, but a gentle distortion, like heat haze rising from a sun-baked rock. The shimmer coalesced for a second, and then a figure stood on the stone floor. It was so utterly, shockingly mundane that for a moment, Xyloc's mind refused to process it. It was a bipedal creature of soft flesh, covered in a simple, dark blue fabric that seemed to have no seams. It was smaller than a Vexian warrior, more fragile-looking than a Cathar elder. It had 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head with a face that held a pair of forward-facing eyes, a small nose, and a mouth. The being was female by the standards of most bipedal species. Her hair was dark, pulled back from her face. Her skin was pale. Her expression was placid. There was no menace in her posture, no arrogance in her gaze. She simply stood there, breathing their air as if she had done so her entire life, her hands held loosely at her sides. The chamber's atmospheric sensors whirred, analyzing her. Nitrogen-oxygen breather, carbon-based. Her biology was entirely within established parameters for Class M worlds. She was, in every measurable way, completely and utterly ordinary, and that more than. Nithing was the most terrifying thing they had ever seen. A being of such unremarkable biology, a member of a species that wielded the power to fold the universe like a piece of parchment. The discrepancy was a chasm of cognitive dissonance. The holographic forms of the council members flickered into existence, surrounding the human envoy. Warlord Grak's avatar was immense, towering over her. Xyloc's own image was positioned directly opposite. The human woman blinked slowly, her gaze sweeping over the assembled figures without a trace of fear or surprise. "I am Ambassador Alara Vance of the Terran Collective," she said. Her voice was the same calm, even tone from the broadcast. It was not synthesized, it was her own. I thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I hope we can alleviate the concerns our arrival has caused. Grak's voice boomed, dripping with suspicion. Concerns? You have shattered our understanding of the universe. You appear from nowhere, using a technology that is a physical impossibility. You ignore our communications and then arrive unbidden in our skies. Concern is a wholly inadequate term for what you have inspired. The ambassador, Ilara Vance, met the warlord's holographic glare with an unblinking calm. Our silence was a precaution. We did not know if this region of space was inhabited by sentient life. To broadcast our presence without understanding the political or cultural landscape would have been irresponsible. We observed you, your communications, the peaceful if tense nature of your concordance. When you sent the canticle, a gesture of profound openness, we knew it was safe to make contact. You speak of responsibility, the Cygnian representative interjected, its voice a cold stream of logic. Yet your method of travel represents the single greatest existential threat we have ever encountered. A flaw in your calculations, a moment of instability in the force you command, could unravel a solar system. Explain the principles of your drive. Our models cannot account for it. It is a violation of the laws of conservation of energy and causality. Ambassador Vance tilted her head slightly, a gesture of consideration. We do not call it a drive. That term implies propulsion, moving an object from point A to point B through the intervening space. We do not move the ship. We move the space. We do not violate the law of conservation of energy because the net energy of the universe remains unchanged. We are simply reallocating spatial dimensions locally and temporarily. Think of reality not as a solid, immutable block, but as a fluid medium. We have learned to create currents and eddies in that medium. Zylok felt a tremor of something akin to spiritual vertigo. She spoke of manipulating the very fabric of existence with the casual air of a sailor discussing the tides. You speak of this, reallocation, as if it were a simple matter. Our greatest minds have theorized about such possibilities, but they were always dismissed as fantasy. The energy, the computational power required, it is beyond the grasp of any civilization we have ever known. It is not a matter of power, the ambassador replied, her voice soft but firm. Not in the way you mean, it is a matter of perception. Your science, as outlined in your beautiful canticle, is masterful. But it is built on the assumption that consciousness is a passive observer of a pre-existing, objective reality. We learned that this assumption is flawed. Consciousness is not merely an observer. It is a fundamental component of reality itself. It can interact with the quantum foam, the substrate of spacetime, in a direct and meaningful way. Our technology is not just machinery. It is a synthesis of machine and a focused, disciplined consciousness. An entire crew, working in mental unison, shapes reality through the vessel's focal lens. The chamber fell silent. The concept was so profoundly alien, so philosophically earth-shattering, that it took a long moment for the council to absorb it. They were not just technologically superior. Their entire paradigm of existence was on a different plane. Their technology was not an external tool, it was an extension of their minds. Grak recovered first, his skepticism a shield against the terrifying implications. Metaphysical nonsense. You are trying to obscure a weapon of unimaginable power with spiritual platitudes. A focused mind. Do you expect us to believe your ships are powered by thought? Not thought in the chaotic individual sense, Vance corrected impatiently, but a unified, coherent state of consciousness, amplified and focused. It is a science, one we have spent centuries perfecting. It requires a level of internal peace and ethical consistency that is difficult to achieve. A mind filled with aggression or fear cannot maintain the necessary coherence. The system would fail. The space would not bend, it would break. Her words hung in the air, a direct and devastating refutation of everything the Vexian hegemony stood for. Their entire culture was built on aggression and the projection of fear. By her logic, they would be fundamentally incapable of ever mastering such a technology. The ultimate power in the universe was not accessible through force, but through its opposite, tranquility. Zylok saw the dawning understanding and rage in Grak's holographic eyes. The warlord was being told that his entire civilization's ethos was a dead end, a primitive evolutionary path. The insult was absolute. So you present yourselves as enlightened beings, Grak snarled. Calm, peaceful, ethical, and yet you hold a power that could extinguish suns. How do we know this is not a deception, a lie to lull us into complacency before you erase us? He gestured with a clawed hand. Show us, prove that you are what you claim to be. Disarm your vessel, power down this reality drive of yours. Only then will we believe you are not a threat. Ambassador Vance's calm expression finally faltered, replaced by something that looked like pity. Warlord Grak, our ship has no weapons to disarm. A tool designed for weaving is not a sword, and we cannot power it down. The field that allows for controlled spatial manipulation is also what sustains our existence within this universe's frame of reference. To collapse it would be unwise for all of us. Her words were an enigma, but her refusal was clear. Grak seized upon it. As I thought, deception and excuses. You refuse to prove your peaceful intentions. Therefore, we must assume you have hostile ones. The Vexian hegemony will not stand by while a knife is held to its throat. High Luminary, my fleets await my command. This charade is over. Before Xyloc could intervene to plead for reason, Grak's avatar vanished. In the observation room, the real warlord was already on his feet, his voice barking orders into his personal comm unit. Alarms began to blare across the capital. A threat condition had been declared. The Vexian hegemony, acting unilaterally, was moving to engage the human ship. In the chamber below, Ambassador Vance watched the space where Grak's image had been. She did not look surprised. She looked weary, a deep and profound sadness in her eyes. She turned her gaze to Xyloc's hologram. "I am sorry it has come to this," she said, her voice filled with genuine regret. "We had hoped for a different outcome." Xyloc felt a cold dread wash over him. "What will you do?" "We will do what is necessary," she replied softly. "We will demonstrate that power is not the same as force." He watched her, this small, fragile-looking creature who stood at the center of a galactic crisis. He saw no fear in her, no anger, only a quiet, unshakable resolve. In the sky above, the Vexian fleet, a swarm of jagged, aggressive warships that had terrorized a dozen star systems, was powering its weapons, preparing to unleash an apocalypse upon the silent, impossible vessel. And Xyloc knew, with a certainty that chilled him to his ancient soul, that they were about to make a mistake of truly cosmic proportions. The sky over Cathar Prime became a canvas of impending violence. The Vexian fleet, a vast armada of warships bristling with energy cannons and missile pods, formed a closing ring around the lone human vessel. Their forms were a stark contrast to the human ship's sleek minimalism. The Vexian designs were all sharp angles, menacing protrusions, and exposed weapon systems, a clear philosophy of intimidation made manifest in metal. On the observation deck of the Grand Cenacle, the main holographic display showed the tactical situation in stark, terrifying detail. Red icons, representing the Vexian warships, converged on the single, motionless blue icon of the human ship. Warlord Grak stood with his command staff, his image projected from his flagship's bridge. His posture radiated triumphant fury. He had been proven right. The humans had refused to disarm, their peaceful rhetoric exposed as a lie. Now the hegemony would do what it did best. It would crush this anomaly and restore the galaxy to a state he understood, one where power, raw and undeniable, was the only truth. "All ships target the primary object," Grak's voice echoed through the Cenacle's observation chamber, a live feed from his command channel. "Fire a warning salvo, a full-spectrum energy discharge. Let them see the power they have provoked." Xyloc watched, helpless. The Concordance Charter allowed for mutual defense, but it also respected the sovereignty of its members. Grak was acting in what he claimed was the defense of the hegemony, a flimsy pretext, but one that politically paralyzed the rest of the Council. To interfere would be to declare war on the Vexians, fracturing the Concordance beyond repair. All they could do was watch. In the sky, a wave of incandescent energy erupted from the Vexian fleet. Beams of pure plasma, lances of coherent gravitons, and torrents of antimatter particles converged on T. Human ship. It was a salvo that could crack a continent, an overwhelming display of force designed to vaporize any known material. The energy filled the space around the human vessel, a sun-bright cataclysm that bleached all color from the sky. And then it was gone. The energy did not impact. It did not splash against a shield or reflect off an armored hull. It simply vanished. In the instant before it would have struck the ship, the space the energy occupied ceased to be a conduit. The beams of light and particles were not blocked. They were unwritten. One moment they were there, a roaring tide of destruction. The next, there was only the silent ship, unharmed, unmoved, hanging against a sky that was now eerily calm. A collective gasp went through the observation chamber. On the bridge of the Vexian flagship, Grak's commanders stared at their screens in stunned disbelief. "No impact registered," a sensor officer reported, his voice trembling. "No energy dissipation. The salvo, it just disappeared." Grak's mandibles tightened. Impossible. They have a shielding technology beyond our comprehension. All ships, full bombardment, overwhelm their defenses. Do not cease fire until that object is a cloud of expanding plasma. Again, the fleet fired. This time it was not a salvo, but a continuous, relentless storm. The sky became a roaring inferno of weaponized energy, and again it had no effect. The human ship remained untouched, a perfect island of calm in a sea of fury. It was not defending itself. It was simply immune. It existed in a state where their violence could not reach it. In the diplomatic chamber below, Ambassador Vance had not moved. She watched a small, holographic repeater showing the battle in the sky, her expression one of deep sorrow. "They do not understand," she murmured, as if to herself. "They believe reality is a wall to be broken, not a language to be spoken." Xylok's holographic form addressed her, his voice tight with urgency. "Ambassador, stop this. Call off your whatever it is you are doing. Retaliate if you must, but end this mockery. You are destroying the Vexian sanity, their entire worldview." "We have not done anything, High Luminary," she replied, her eyes meeting his. "We are simply reinforcing the reality of our own space. We are refusing to participate in their narrative of violence. But you are right. This cannot continue. It is time for a different demonstration." She closed her eyes for a moment. On the human ship, a change occurred. It was subtle. A soft, low hum vibrated not through the air, but through the fabric of spacetime itself. It was not a sound, but a feeling, a deep, resonant chord that every living being on the planet felt in their bones. The Cygnian representative's lights began to flash wildly. Unprecedented spatial distortion, it's emanating from the human vessel, it's expanding. The Vexian fleet, still firing relentlessly, seemed to shimmer. The space they occupied grew hazy, indistinct. The ships themselves began to stretch, their forms elongating as if seen through flawed glass. On Grak's bridge, consoles sparked and alarms shrieked as navigational sensors failed. The stars on their viewscreen were warping, swirling into streaks of light. "What is happening?" Grak roared, his arrogance finally cracking, revealing the fear beneath. "Report." "Sir, we are moving," the navigator stammered, his claws frozen above his console. "But the engines are cold, we are not under power, all of known space is shifting around us." The human ship remained perfectly still over Cathar Prime, but the Vexian fleet, the entire massive armada, was being moved. They were not being pushed or pulled. The very space they inhabited was being carried away, like a drawing on a sheet of paper being dragged across a table. The ships vanished from the sky of Cathar Prime, not in a flash of light, but by receding into an impossible distance at an impossible speed. One moment they were there, a sky full of warships. The next, the sky was empty, save for the silent human ship. The battle was over. Not a single shot had been returned. Not a single life had been lost. The Vexian fleet had been defeated not by force, but by geography. A message was relayed to the Cenacle, sent from the Vexian fleet on a delayed, tightly focused beam. It was from a panicked Vexian admiral. His voice was laced with awe and terror. He reported that they were unharmed, all ships accounted for. They were simply elsewhere. They were adrift in a region of completely uncharted space, surrounded by unknown constellations. They were, by his frantic calculations, thousands of light years from Concordance territory. They were lost, utterly and completely lost. A final, system-wide broadcast issued from the human ship in the calm, even voice of Ambassador Vance. "The demonstration is complete. We do not seek conflict. We do not seek territory. We seek understanding. The Vexian hegemony has been said in a state of enforced reflection. They are unharmed and have sufficient resources for a long journey. Perhaps on their way home, they will contemplate a new definition of power. We are now ready to continue our discussion." Silence reigned in the Grand Cenacle. Warlord Grak's communication link was dead. His fleet, the pride and terror of the galaxy, had been neutralized, dismissed with the casual ease of a god brushing away a fly. His entire philosophy of force had been rendered not just obsolete, but absurd. The Cygnian representative was a statue of chrome, its processors trying to build a new model of the universe that could contain what had just happened. The lumina's light was a steady, brilliant white, a color of pure, unadulterated awe. High Luminary Xylok looked at the image of the human ambassador, still standing calmly in the chamber below. The pity he had seen in her eyes now made sense. It was the pity of the truly powerful for those who could not see beyond their own aggression. The humans were not conquerors. They were something far more profound. They were a new law of nature. He finally understood. The Vexians had brought a sword to a conversation about the nature of reality. The humans had not fought back. They had simply changed the subject, and in doing so they had changed everything. The balance of power in the galaxy had not just shifted, it had evaporated. A new age had begun, not with a bang, but with a quiet, impossibly vast repositioning. The aftermath was a period of profound and unnerving quiet. The Vexian hegemony, deprived of its primary armada and its belligerent leader, fell into a state of internal chaos, its fangs pulled. The rest of the concordance was left to grapple with the new reality. Humanity was not a rival empire to be contained or a foe to be defeated. They were a context shift, a fundamental change in the rules of existence. Negotiations resumed, but their tone was vastly different. The concordance was no longer a council of powers interrogating a newcomer. They were pupils, sitting at the feet of a master, trying to comprehend a lesson they had not even known existed. Ambassador Vance met with High Luminary Xyloch and a select few other council members, not in the cold, sterile diplomatic chamber, but in the Hall of Contemplation, a serene space within the cenacle where ancient Cathar philosophers had once debated the meaning of the Great Design. The air was filled with the scent of rare stellar orchids, and the only sound was the gentle chime of crystalline resonators. It was a place of peace, and Vance seemed more at home here than she had in the formal chamber. "Your restraint has humbled us," Xyloch began, his voice low and devoid of its usual formal cadence. They were not speaking as heads of state, but as two beings trying to find common ground across a vast conceptual gulf. "You possess the power to eradicate the Vexian fleet, to destroy our worlds, yet you chose not to. You chose an act of inconvenient mercy. Why?" Alara Vance looked out at the stardusted gardens visible through the chamber's crystalline walls. "Because violence is a failure of imagination. It is the crudest tool used when all other, more elegant solutions have been overlooked. To destroy the Vexians would have taught a lesson of fear. We wish to teach a lesson of perspective. They believed the universe was a finite space to be conquered. We gave them more of it to contemplate. It is a harsh lesson, perhaps, but not a fatal one." The Signian representative, present as a silent, floating silver sphere, projected a question in soft, synthesized tones. "Your stated goal is understanding. Yet you have not made demands. You have not claimed territory. You have not sought resources. This behavior is inconsistent with all known models of civilizational expansion. What is your true purpose in this galaxy?" Vance turned her gaze from the gardens, and for the first time Xyloch saw a flicker of the same deep, weary sorrow she had shown before the Vexian attack. Her calm facade seemed to thin, revealing a profound gravity beneath. "We came here because we had no choice. We are not explorers in the way you think. We are refugees, and we are scouts." The word hung in the quiet chamber. Refugees. A species that could fold spacetime, that could dismiss armadas without a fight, were refugees? It made no sense. "Refugees from what?" Xyloch asked, his mind racing through possibilities. "A dying star, a galactic catastrophe, a civil war." "From a threat you cannot yet perceive," Vance said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. She raised her hand, and the air in front of her shimmered. A holographic display bloomed into existence, but it was not a tactical map or a scientific diagram. It was a map of the known universe, a vast, three-dimensional tapestry of galaxies and nebulae familiar to all of them. But there was something wrong with it. At the far, trailing edge of their own galaxy, and in the intergalactic void beyond, there were patches of nothing. Not the blackness of empty space, but a true ontological void. It was a creeping, mottled darkness that seemed to be eating the stars. "What is this?" the Signian sphere asked, its synthesized voice holding a trace of something that might have been alarm. "A sensor artifact, a region of obscuring dust." "No," Vance said softly. "It is not a presence. It is an absence. We call it the Great Unraveling. It is a slow, inexorable decay of the fundamental constants of the universe. In those zones, the laws of physics are becoming unreliable. Space-time frays. Matter loses its coherence. Light itself slows and dies. It is the heat death of the universe, but happening prematurely locally and spreading like a disease." Xyloch stared at the creeping void on the map, a coldness seeping into his ancient bones that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. The Lumina, who had been a silent observer until now, pulsed with a frantic, terrified light. The song, it is fading. A silence is growing at the edge of the symphony. A final, eternal silence. "We first detected it centuries ago," Vance continued, her eyes fixed on the encroaching darkness. "A faint resonance, a wrongness in the cosmic background radiation. We studied it, and we came to a terrifying conclusion. It is not a natural process, or rather it is a natural process that has been triggered. accelerated by an ancient, unimaginable event that occurred billions of years ago on the other side of the universe. An echo of that event is now reaching our part of creation. She finally looked at them, her human face etched with a burden that Xyloc was only just beginning to comprehend. Our ability to manipulate spacetime was not developed for travel or for war. It was born of desperation. It was an attempt to understand the very fabric of reality so that we might learn how to mend it. We are not weavers by choice. We are cosmic physicians, attempting to heal a universe that is dying. The revelation was a blow more staggering than any display of technological might. Their own galactic squabbles, the rise and fall of empires, the Vexians' petty aggression, it all seemed like the squabbling of children in the shadow of a tidal wave. They had been afraid of the humans, thinking them a potential predator, when all along they were the first responders to a fire that threatened to consume the entire house. "We are running out of time," Vance said, her composure finally cracking, allowing a tremor of desperation to enter her voice. "The unraveling is accelerating. We have spent generations learning to reinforce reality in small, localized pockets, but we cannot stop the tide. We are not powerful enough, not alone. We came here to your galaxy because our long-range sensors detected a unique confluence of stable, ancient civilizations, a concordance. We came here seeking allies. We need your knowledge, your resources, your perspectives. We need your minds added to ours." She gestured to the map, to the brilliant, vibrant swirl of their galaxy, and then to the encroaching void. "They called what we do impossible. And for us, for a long time it was. We turned that impossibility into reality out of necessity. Now we all face a new impossible, saving existence itself. We do not know if it can be done, but we must try, together." High Luminary Xyloc looked at the human, Alara Vance. He saw not an alien, not a threat, but a kindred spirit, a leader carrying a weight that dwarfed his own. He saw the quiet strength that came from facing true oblivion. He saw the courage to extend a hand of peace even when holding the power of a god. Humanity was not the galaxy's new master. They were its new hope. He looked at the map, at the fragile light of a billion stars threatened by a silent, patient darkness. The fear he had felt in the Grand Cenacle was gone, replaced by something far larger, far more profound, a sense of purpose. The great design of the universe was not a finished text to be revered. It was an ongoing creation, a story being written, and it was facing its final, fading chapter. And now, a new author had arrived, inviting them to help write a different ending. "You will have our help," Xyloc said, his voice ringing with a conviction he had not felt in centuries. "The concordance was formed to face the great threats of our time. It seems we simply did not know what a great threat truly was, until now." The human ambassador gave him a small, weary, but genuine smile. It was a light of hope in the face of an infinite darkness. The real work, the impossible work, was about to begin.